Okay, I've already started the thread onto the hook. Everybody here knows how to do that. And the next step is, and I started about an eye length back. The next step is going to be to put in your thread or wire, or not thread, excuse me, tinsel. So you start your tinsel and wrap it all the way to the back, almost to the bend of the hook, right to where it starts to go back. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go like 4 or 5 thread wraps up and down the body, covering this tinsel or wire up. And then I'm using a UTC, well, it's actually a Danville flat waxed 3/0 thread. So I'll get down here after doing 3 or 4 runs, and I'll spin this counterclockwise to kind of get the thread to lay out a little bit, lay a little bit flatter. And then we're just going to try to cover that body as smooth as possible. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect because the wing's going to be covering it, but you know, everybody likes a good looking fly. So I'll get it up here, and then I'll just drop my tinsel, do a quick little half hitch in the front, and you don't have to, you can just roll this around if you don't have a rotary vise. I like to counter wrap it, 1 wrap at the back, and then, whoops, this little light vise is moving around on me. Do about 5 to 7, 8 wraps, just as long as they're fairly even. Right up to where you started the thread. Then we're just going to reach over and under and tie this off. A couple of wraps over, a couple of wraps over that side, and then just trim it off close. Okay. Now generally when I do these at home, I'll coat this body, set it aside, and tie another one. And I'll do that for like 6 of them. And then I go to this step of putting the eyes and the wing on after, because this tinsel will tend to tear off a little bit. But you know, with time being not on our side doing this, we're gonna go ahead and put the eyes on. So I start, these are 5/32 bead chain eyes, just bath bead chain. And what we're going to do is just start these on the hook. I like to start it by just putting it on top. Whoops, there we go, this way. On top and around until you capture it. And I like to leave about a little bit of room up there so you have a head. And we don't want to overwrap these. These don't have to be real tight yet. We're going to glue them in place. So they'll be able to adjust, because I want to, when I get the wing material in, you'll see why. But now we're going to either take it out of your vise or invert your vise. Kind of square those eyes up a little bit. And then we're going to do some yellow marabou. So just strip you a piece of marabou off. And some of these have a little bit too fine of ends, I think, so I like to just kind of pinch them. I'm going to leave a mess here today, Dave. Sorry about that. And I like these a little bit longer than the hook, not much, and I'll kind of measure it up there and trim some of this excess off so you don't have so much sticking out. And one thing I found that helps me when I'm working with marabou is to have a little bit of water handy. It makes it, because marabou can be a little unruly. But just a little bit of water on there and it kind of tames it down. And we're just going to secure that onto the hook. Not going to worry too much about getting a bunch of wraps yet, because we're going to put a little orange over the top of that. And I got a little bit near the eye, so I'm just going to pull that back. And then we're going to use a little orange over the top of that fly. And this bug, it can be so fun when you're catching, when there's bluegill in the shallows. And that happens in the spring, pre-spawn and post-spawn. And all you have to do is drop it gently into a little area and start a nice slow strip. So again, I'm pinching the tips, measuring the wing, and then cut it. So I just have a little bit out in the front. Sorry about the shaking, it runs in the family. And then we're just going to wrap that.
You're wrapping the marabou, are you figure eighting it around the eye?
Yep, I'm figure eighting it and just building up some thread now. So you want to build up quite a few thread wraps, and this will secure those eyes pretty good, but we're going to glue it next. And in the past, I've always used just super glue, or even Sally Hansen hard as nails after using some glue to give it a little bulk. But Brent Hodge was kind enough to lend me his UV light, so we're going to UV this head. And then you're just going to whip finish. And I don't worry about doing too many more than 3 or 4 wraps, because it's going to get quite a bit of glue on there, and it's going to be holding clear back into the fly body. Not the body, but the head. Okay. Kind of move everything out of the way. And time to glue. This is the UV thick, and it works good for these because you can kind of move it around if you have to, and make sure your eyes are on good, and just got a little bit on the marabou. And I tried to get a little bit all over the fly, all over the head, a little like kind of make it look a little bit less like a dumbbell by filling in that middle. And this stuff's this UV material is pretty good. You can work with it for a while before you hit it with the light.
Unless you're outside. If you're outside, you got half a second.
What's that, Dave?
I said if you're outside, you get half a second.
Yeah, that's right. The sun does just like this little light here. And it only takes like, I think, 10 seconds a side, but I like to hit it on all 4 sides. You do have to make sure your eye's clear. I didn't clear this eye really good, but I'll generally keep a piece of hackle on the side. That tends to clean out the eye real good. Now this UV material, UV glue, ends up being a little tacky. Even after it dries, it'll pick up dust in little bits of stuff. And what you can do is just use a little like hand sanitizer cloth, go over it, and it will make it so it's not so tacky. And that's the S.M.P, Skip Morris Panfish. All right, we're going to tie a simple popper, and I bought these popper heads from Orvis, and they came with the hooks. They didn't say that in the advertisement, so I have extra hooks, which it's kind of nice to get them sized right and everything, because I'll let you know how I like to size mine. A little bit bigger hook. This is actually, they don't even tell you what size the hooks are, but it's got to be Let me see, let me look at my other ones. That's a 6, I believe. A 6 bass hook. So we're gonna start with a yellow thread. They suggest to start with he ties this with a black 3/0. I'm gonna use a yellow, just, I don't know, the fly has a lot of yellow in, and I like to use yellow, the same color as the fly. We're just going to wrap our thread on the hook all the way almost to the point of the hook. And sorry, I got my materials a little scattered. I got out visiting a little bit. Then we're going to put the tail on. And I like to use a chartreuse or olive. I'm going to use olive today. And you get out 2 matching pair. We're going to do 2 hackles on each side. And I like to measure them about the length of the hook. So we'll cut those off. That'll just be scrap there, and strip a little bit of this material off. And we want these to be kind of convex, so they stick out. Stick out sideways, kind of like yeah, like a mayfly tail or something like that. Frog's legs. This probably imitates a frog, but you know what? I don't think it matters to bass. They're a little bit like playing or teasing a cat. If you throw stuff at them long enough, they're going to get ticked off and come up and at least take a poke at it. And it's like if I know there's a bass in the area, what I'll do sometimes is I'll do like 15 casts to it and try a couple of different directions and whatnot. Whoops, this one's being a little unruly.
So that's 2 hackles per side?
2 hackles per side. And these didn't splay as pretty as some hackles. I just bought this hackle, but they're supposed to splay out a little bit. And trim off your excess. Then we're going to kind of measure and see that this body and how much room we're going to have for a hackle. So now we're going to use a black hackle. And tie the hackle on just like you would a dry fly hook. And I'll generally use just 2. And all my regular dry fly hackle is like really small. So I just used this is just actually a woolly bugger soft hackle pack. And you want these to be about as long as the hook. I'll strip off some of the hackle fibers, and then I'm going to tie it in. And then we're going to do like, probably 3 wraps, maybe 4. Yeah, it looks like 4 for this one. And then we're going to just tie it off. Now these flies you can make them just as fancy as you want. I mean, I've taken time to like on the heads of them, on the foam heads, to paint them or buy them. You can buy them painted if you do want to go different color, because it's the same, the same story. Sometimes the fish are looking for something lighter, sometimes darker. Let me clean that up a little bit. I still have some strays out here. Now generally I have heads that have slits in, these don't, so we're going to push this back. But before we push it back, I'm going to take some super glue and coat this body all the way back to that hackle. That'll kind of prevent it from sliding, and then also from this popper body sliding. And then I'm going to come up here and just do a half hitch. Let's see, where's my tool? Just like me to set it down. And then I'm going to put just a little bit more of that super glue on there. Because I did kind of rough wraps on that second and third wrap I put on. Whoop. Used to using the other type of super glue. There we go. And you're going to take this body, and it has a hole in the end. You're going to force it over this eye and then just push it back to that hackle. Some of these have like a tapered side like this. See how that's cupped and tapered? You want to hurry and get it there. And then we're just going to like let it sit there for 15, 20 seconds. One thing I forgot to do is put on my weed guard. So I'll tie one more with the weed guard while you guys are tying. But generally what I'll do is, on a lot of these, I'll use a weed guard because you're throwing back into cover a lot of times when you're fishing for bass. And that's all it is a piece of monofilament you put on first before the tail. I don't know how I forgot it, but I did. And I'll show you how to tie one. But that's basically the fly, except after it dries good, we're going to put on some little rubber legs. And I generally put on 2 to 3. Because after a while, these, especially rubber, and I'm going to start trying to use super floss because this rubber will rot, and I tend to keep my bass flies for years. You know, generally you're using, what, 10-pound test. But I'll get 3 of these. I'm going to tie them in a little knot, just a little simple overhand knot. Tighten it up. And get your bodkin. And we're going to try to stick that through straight and as perpendicular as possible. Now, at home, sometimes I'll get a cigarette lighter and heat this bodkin up, and it helps. Make sure that hole's nice and open. Then you're going to take your threader and work that through the hole. This one's being a little difficult. And then you take your your legs, put them inside the threader. I got to have my threader open up more before they'll go in there. There you go. And now we're going to slowly pull them through. You don't want to pull it through too quick or this stuff could break on you. So nice and slow. We're just tying flies. We're not in a big hurry. Okay. And get that knot pretty close. I like to put a little bit of super glue on this again. Doesn't take much. And then finish pulling that knot right into the body. Doesn't have to be very far in. See, I've already got some of these legs separated, but then you could take your bodkin or tip of your scissors, anything you want. Separate these legs out. And something about these rubber legs really like infuriate the bass. They're gonna like jump on this guy. I keep my legs about as long as the hook shank, so I'll pull them back here, kind of measure. I'll just eyeball those, and I'll trim them about where the hook shank ends. You don't want these way, way long, but if you do get them too long, you can always trim them. But that's the, and then, if you want to tie flies to impress your friends, then you paint them up, you put eyes on. But to catch fish, this is all you need. Otherwise, you're just impressing some other fly fishers. But just a simple popper tends to work really good for bass. Okay, as I said, I forgot to put the hook guard in, so like the other fly, we start the thread. And there's several types. I've actually bought some of the steel, they have little steel guarded, little steel wire pre-tied in. Some of the bass companies tie them that way, and I've used those, but not on poppers because you can't slide it over because you can't secure this eye till later. And I'm using 15-pound Maxima Ultra Green. It's kind of stiff because you want your weed guard to be rather stiff. That's why you see those bass guys set those hooks so hard. I mean,
They gotta overcome that.
well, some of them have weed guards in, but yeah, you just lay that right on top of the hook. You want to keep it as on top of the hook as possible. And you just follow this down the shank. And the weed guard will work better if you take the thread down a little deeper.
I've tried to do this with trout flies, and it's a great way not to ever catch another trout.
Yeah, well, trout have a very, their mouth are like their fingertips, I think. They kind of feel stuff like this. And then I would just go ahead and tie that fly. I could just tie another one if you guys would like me to, or I could just tell you how to do this so we can get tying. Then after you get your popper on, and what you do is you start your thread up here again, but then you take this, actually it's best to take this out of the vise, and just take that little weed guard, snag guard, weed guard, whatever you want to call it, and I'll just lay it up by the eye, but remember we're going to have a popper here. And you kind of size it. If you make it too big, it's really a good weed guard, but it's not a very good fish catcher. So you have to kind of go a happy medium, so you got some good guard there. So it's going to hit a weed and kind of push it off to the side. So then what you do is you just tie this down. That's why you have to leave a little room at the eye. And that's basically the weed guard. You just, now what I'd do is just clip this off.
You do that band part first, then you build the fly out, and then that last part.
Yeah, yep, you put the weed guard in first, then you do the whole fly, and you leave that weed guard sitting out here. Once you get the popper on, you can go ahead and get up here and do your whip finish, and then a little daub of super glue. All right, feller fly fishers and tires, we're gonna tie a bluegill spider, bluegill bug, goes by many names, but it's a simple fly. It's all it is thread, foam, and legs. And I tie these in yellow for bright days, and you can use dark for darker days. And the good thing about the darker ones, you can trim the legs back and they'll work for a carpenter ant if you tie them with the extended body for trout. We're going to start this fly on a size 10 dry fly hook. I'm using a Tiemco 101. And here we go.
So what size is
It's a 10.
10.
Yeah.
If anybody needs some, I got extra.
And I have extra materials up if anybody needs any after we get done tying your end. Just start your thread. Take it right back to that hook point again. And we're going to trim that waist. And now we're going to get our foam. And what I've been using this for years. It's larval lace foam. I bought it from Jan's for $2.50, so it's been a while. But it goes a long ways. And I used to have a cutter, a paper cutter, but I can't locate it. It makes these edges a little tighter. It's the old paper cutter like we used to use in school. You know, it'll date you, but you guys know what I mean. It cuts this foam way good. The best thing I found to cut it with. So, anyways, you cut about maybe an inch, inch and a quarter. And then there's two ways to tie this. You can tie it like the one I had with the extended body. I'm going to show you the other way because the extended body is really simple. This is simple too, but I'll take a piece of Flashaboo, kind of tie it on, double it back, tie it on. Just two little pieces is all I leave on there. I leave them about maybe half the hook shank length. Then I take my foam and I trim it to a point. And this is really soft, spongy foam. But it's to a point. I'm going to tie it in like you would an ant or something, so kind of so the foam's laying back. Make sure you capture enough of it that it's not going to just slip through. And don't do too tight of wraps if you're using a thinner thread. It will cut right through this foam. And then I'll put a little bit of super glue. I don't like to glue the entire shank yet because I'll do that after, but a little bit of super glue. Otherwise, this thing tends to slide around a lot. And then I'll tie another loop up there about halfway. It's about 6 wraps. And then we're going to take some of those rubber legs again, and you can use, a lot of times guys will use white legs on these. I'm just going to use the yellow today. And we need just 2 legs per side, so what we'll do is we'll get us a piece. And I like to lay this on my thread and then pull it into place. Just a couple, not too tight wraps yet. We're going to put the other side in. And the same method. So you had that one a little bit long on one side, so with having the loose wraps, I was able to kind of get a more equal length. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to advance this thread almost to the eye, probably almost eye length back, and then we're going to tie another section of body in here. About 6 wraps. And you're going to pull this back and just trim it off kind of blunt. And then I will pull this back and wrap some more. I got my head a little crowded, but. And then we're just going to throw some half hitches on that. Okay, set it somewhere. Thought I had it right. Hiding. And these half hitches should go right in front of that, right by the eye. You have to be careful you don't capture the legs. And we're going to glue this, so you don't have to do massive amounts of half hitches on there. Cut your thread, turn it over, and just brush a little glue on it. Making sure not to get it in the eye, of course, keeping it back on the body. Because this foam will tend to spin on you, and it'll be upside down if you don't glue it after a few fish. But that's a simple bluegill spider, bluegill bug. It's really effective on those bluegill in the shallows, and I've even had bass take it, poke at it, and so they're very easy to tie, guys. And that little tail, I don't know what it does, but the fish like it. Anyways, we're going to tie a dragon today. I first noticed bass taking dragonflies over at Sand Hollow back 2004, and all I had with me then was some deer hair, so I made an extended deer hair body, and it worked pretty good for a couple of years, but then it just kind of came apart. So since then I've moved to foam, and what we're going to do is just start a little thread on here onto the hook. I start like most of the times about an eye length back. And the damsels are usually blue and olive down there, so if you're going to tie a smaller version of this, a damselfly, you want to go either blue or olive. And I don't know, I've seen them paired up, both, so they don't care what color they are. I've seen blue and olive paired up together. I don't know if one's a female, one's a male or not for sure. But anyways.
One on top's the male.
Well, it's hard to tell who's on top, I'll tell you. I'll have to show you a picture later of a mating. I'm going to use some red foam today, and I'm going to start that right about at the hook, at the back of the back of the hook. A couple of bends, wraps. I'm going to come up and do another couple of wraps. Kind of leave a little bit of a segmentation, and then I'm going to tie this down. Now there are ways to make a whole segmented body, and I've seen guys tie them that way. They look really good, but it takes a while. I have not done it enough that I am proficient at it. Therefore, I tend to just tie them this way with just flat foam, and they still work. They've worked for me. Now what I'll do is I'll make this about, most dragonflies are about that long, so that's what's that, about maybe 1.5 hook shanks, but I'll taper this to a point. Not a really tight point, but kind of a blunt one. And then on the original fly, what they did is they tied the legs and the wings in now. I find that very cumbersome to work around all that. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go to my method. This is actually a fly that was developed by John Betts. And then I have some other foam, and I have plenty of this materials, guys, so I've got it pre-cut. Oh, I've got one right here. This is going to be like a back on it. I'll taper that. Tie that in. And then get yourself a little bit of dubbing. So we're going to need it. And this is a rust sparkle dubbing. And it's just, be because these flies are rather slender, but then they'll bulk up at the thorax. Might need a little bit more. Make sure you leave a little bit of eye room. Okay, now we're going to tie in some rubber legs. Now, they say on the original you can use 50-pound Dacron. Me being out of town, like I was the last few days, I didn't have enough time, so we can use rubber legs too. And these, I have plenty of these also. We're going to use 3 on each side. So I'll pull off 3. Just kind of measure them up, and these can go on top because that foam's going to push everything down. And just kind of figure 8 them in there so that they're laying fairly even. I've got these a little long right now. We're going to trim them. Because those wings are generally not, when they lay back, if you've ever seen a damselfly or a dragonfly at rest, their wings don't go quite to the back, but they'll be, probably 3/4. So you can trim these about that length now. A little cumbersome to work around all this material, but that's why this is an advanced class.
I was painting in the big box.
And then we're going to use, and I've used various materials for these wings. A lot of the tires will use hackles, and they'll just like take a grizzly hackle and splay out 4 of them. I found them a little bit too wind resistant, especially when you're trying to hit a target. So I've gone to this fish fiber, and this fish fiber is supposed to float. So I just take some of, I gotta slice this up. Oh, come on. Can't get the scissors in there. There we go. I'll just get a clump of this. Fairly good sized clump, probably 1/4 inch around. I'm going to lay this in there. And the same thing, I'm going to kind of try to capture it all into within figure 8 wraps. We're going to glue this so we don't need a lot more wraps. Then you're going to take this top part, you're going to bend it over, pull it over the front, trying to hold all this other stuff out of your way. And then we're just going to tie this off. And some guys like to use the plastic eyes on this. I've used plastic eyes before, but it's just one more thing to put on, and I found that these black magic markers make a good head on these. These fish, I mean, these insects do have a prominent wide head. So, and then I'll just do a couple of whip finishes here. And if you'd like to, some guys will even divide the wings into 4 sets of wings, because they do have 4 sets of wings. But they tend to bunch up after a while anyways. So you can just separate them like every 3rd or 4th cast. Whoops, I got some of the other material in there. All right, it kind of looks like a mess right now, but we're going to clean that up in a weird color. We're going to clean all that up. Then you take it and kind of splay everything out. And it's time for glue again. I'm just going to use this crazy glue, but that UV glue would be really good on this. And just put a little bit of glue right down here on the bottom. I want to get enough in there to secure all these, because this wing material is very slippery. I mean, you'll start having to pull right out on you. At least some of the others. I haven't used this particular one, but every other one I've used has been. Then we can kind of size the wings again. Get them so they go about 3/4. And then this one's got a little bit too thick of wings probably, but not bad. See, then every time before you fish it, you can just do this, separate them out rather than try to separate them. But now comes the fun part, the magic marker part, because see, this, I can't find rust-colored foam. So what I've done is, with the help of my lovely wife, because this fly tyer is colorblind, I'll take a little bit of the orange. And these guys are a little mottled color, so you don't have to get them really solid. And just kind of color them up a little bit with some of the orange. And then I'll go with the brown. And these are just Sharpies, inexpensive little Sharpies. And my wife said it looked a little better when I actually put little stripes on it instead of went completely brown. It looked more rusty to her. But you can have fun with these foam and Sharpies, and it stays on there really good if you don't take it to the water right away. I'll use, and like I said, you could use the little bead on the eyes. I'll take black and just put a little, because their eyes are almost the whole front of them. I'll just put black in the front. And then if you want to get fancy, you can start striping the wings and all that type of stuff, because they do have a stripe on their wings. And if you want to do anything different with the legs, you can too. You can either tie, they suggest tying in, they mostly tie olive. That's probably the most prevalent color. And they'll tie in a yellow and I believe an olive for the legs. 2 yellows and 1 olive. And that'll make, not also the legs, but like those wing veins that are sticking out on some of these dragons. And that's my simple dragon.